Hollow Creek, Indiana was the kind of Midwestern town that still taped paper flyers to telephone poles, still waved at school buses, still closed the diner at 9. On a brittle November evening, the temperature fell fast and the wind felt like it had teeth. Emily Turner, 16, clocked out at Hutch's Diner at 8:41 p.m. She texted her mother she'd be home in 15. She rode the old 10-speed she refused to replace because she said new bikes got stolen faster. Old Mill Road was empty except for the hum of distant highway tires from I-74 and the sound of dry leaves scraping the asphalt. At 8:54 p.m., a porch camera on Mill and Beasley recorded her coasting by, ponytail tucked through a ball cap, light jacket, neon ankle reflectors blinking like a heartbeat. At 8:56 p.m., a neighbor walking his dog heard the soft metallic clatter of a bicycle tipping and a single short gasp that could have been surprise or fear or just cold air catching in a throat. He found the bike on its side in the ditch, the back wheel still turning, a candy wrapper stuck to the tire, the headlight focused on nothing. The sheriff's office took the call at 9:02. Deputy Corbin arrived at 9:13 and did what small-town deputies do first. He talked himself into calm. Maybe she cut through the woods to shorten the route. Maybe a friend picked her up and forgot to tell anyone. But the facts were facts. 2 sets of footprints, Emily's and someone else's, ran parallel in the soft shoulder dust and then, 10 yards into the tree line, the second set turned, the spacing widened, like someone lengthened their stride, and then the prints simply stopped. No drag marks. No scuffle. No heel pivots. Just an abrupt end on hard-packed ground. Corbin swept his flashlight left and right and felt a sensation he could not name, something like standing at the edge of a diving board in the dark. By midnight, Hollow Creek had done what American towns do when the unthinkable knocks. They showed up. Church vans, pickup trucks, and a surprising number of headlamps flickered in the pines. Volunteers formed lines. A retired science teacher brought flagging tape and organized grids. The sheriff authorized a drone from the next county over. They found nothing. They found everything else. Lost beer cans, a deer skull, a backpack that belonged to no one, a single loop earring that Emily's mother swore was not her daughter's, a Polaroid of the river taken decades ago, cigarette butts in neat piles as if someone waited there often. At 1:17 a.m., phones across the county banged with the sharp exhale of an Amber Alert. It was cold, precise, unsentimental, white female, 16, 5'5", brown hair, last seen on bicycle, blue jacket, Old Mill Road. People clicked the link, stared at Emily's yearbook photo, and felt a pressure rise behind the eyes. At 6 a.m., Channel 8 ran a 30-second segment between weather and sports. The anchor barely glanced at the teleprompter. But at 6 hours and 27 seconds, the bottom ticker glitched, paused, and then displayed 4 words some viewers caught with a screenshot and most convinced themselves they had imagined. Hollow Creek, 1 of 7. By afternoon, the case drew a second ring of attention. State police, a federal liaison because the interstate ran close and kidnappings near federal corridors light up different dashboards. An investigative reporter from Indianapolis arrived with a camera guy who drank black coffee from a thermos and never seemed to blink. And because the internet finds everything, a smaller reporter arrived too, a 28-year-old YouTuber named Ava Pierce, who called her channel Rust Belt Files. Ava filmed the telephone poles, the diner's dark windows, the county map taped to a folding table, her voice measured and serious. She asked fair questions and impolite ones. She noticed things other people were too polite to say out loud. She noticed the sheriff was liked, which is different than trusted. She noticed a second Amber Alert ping at 9:31 p.m. for a town 90 minutes east with a name that also ended in Creek. She noticed that in the screenshot of Channel 8's glitch, the colon alignment matched television control room formatting, not the station's normal ticker style. Someone had inserted that line on purpose. At sundown the second day, volunteers pushed deeper along the river path. A freshman wrestler named Logan found something ash-gray and oval under the roots of a sycamore. It was a burner phone wrapped in plastic and tape. The battery was dead. The SIM tray was missing. Ava filmed Corbin bagging it while the river made a noise like teeth chattering. Then the wind died all at once, in that way Midwestern wind sometimes does, like someone closed a door. People looked up together. Across the river, a silver semi eased onto the service road behind an abandoned grain silo, idled, and went dark. 10 minutes later, without anyone walking to or away from it, the semi eased back onto the service road and merged toward I-74. It had no company markings, just a rectangle of cleaner metal where a logo used to be. You could convince yourself it was nothing. You could convince yourself everything was nothing, right up until the second ticker hit a different station with words that were not supposed to exist. River Glen, 2 of 7. The sheriff told the press correlation was not causation, which is true when you want it to be. He asked people to stop spreading rumors, which is also what you say when you do not have enough truth to feed them. At midnight, Ava uploaded a 12-minute video titled, "Vanished in Plain Sight." At 12:08, a private Facebook group of long-haul truckers began sharing it with the caption, "Check your dash cams between 8:30 to 10 o'clock. 74 eastbound, no questions asked." At 12:11, a user named Route Milo posted a still frame of a bike's blinking ankle reflectors captured in the ghost glow of a passing trailer's running lights. He wrote, "I thought this was a deer." And then he wrote, "There's a second reflection higher up in the ditch. Eye level." The town slept badly. Somewhere after 3, a freight train knocked its slow rhythm through the dark. Somewhere before 5, Ava replayed the dashcam still for the 20th time and finally saw the thing she had been trying not to see. The second reflection was not an eye in a ditch. It was a hooded camera lens pointed up from the drainage culvert, capturing the road above it like a hunter's blind. When the sun came up, the sheriff stood in front of microphones and promised more boots on the ground. He did not mention the culvert camera. He did not mention the second town. He did not mention that the burner phone, once charged in an evidence cradle, contained exactly one thing: a single video file time-stamped 12 hours before Emily vanished. The file was 9 seconds long. It was shot from inside a moving vehicle. It showed the back of Emily's 10-speed as she pedaled, oblivious. The camera lifted, as if the person holding it stood up in a van. A man's voice off-screen said, "1." And then it cut to black. The second town was River Glen, a place with 2 stoplights and a summer festival built around a pie contest and a lawn tractor parade. Their missing person was a 20-year-old named Mateo Alvarez, a community college student who stocked shelves at night. He finished his shift, sent his girlfriend a bicep selfie with a box of dog food and a caption about being Warehouse Hercules, and disappeared somewhere between the back door and his car. Security footage showed a white van with a repaired rear panel pausing in the loading zone at 1:12 a.m., taillights fluttering like a heart murmur. The store manager described it as contractor white, the kind of van that blends into the background of every American parking lot, the kind you don't notice until you are told to. A state police analyst named Patel drew lines on a map, Hollow Creek, River Glen, and asked a computer to do what computers do well when the inputs are clean and not everything is random. The lines bent toward interstates, distribution hubs, and old rail spurs where trucks sleep heavy with their engines off. He overlaid recent Amber Alerts, then filtered for camera outages in the half hour before and after each disappearance. Holes appeared like missing teeth scattered across 3 counties. Someone was killing power to the eyes on purpose. Ava sat in the diner with a legal pad because people tell more when you write with a pen. She asked about white vans and old silos and which roads had been repaved this fall. She asked a waitress if anyone who wasn't from here had been tipping like they wanted to be remembered. The waitress said, "The new sheriff's deputy sits in his car between midnight and 2 and never orders and never waves back." Ava said the deputy had transferred from Ohio. The waitress said, "Your point?" Ava said, "People who move to quiet don't usually bring more quiet with them." The sheriff, Luke Grady, had lines around his eyes from 46 Indiana winters. He stood square the way men stand who learned young that the world is more impressed with certainty than curiosity. He smiled at the microphones and added more deputies to the grid search and authorized overtime without looking at the county budget. He shook Ava's hand and told her he watched her videos and liked how she treated people like people. Then he told his second-in-command to find out who she was dating and where she slept and what kind of car she drove. He told himself that was normal precaution. He told himself a lot of things. At 11:07 p.m., Channel 8 cut from college basketball highlights to an ad for a mattress company run by a man who shouted. The shout froze mid-word. The screen pixelated into blocks, then back to clarity, but it wasn't the mattress guy anymore. It was a live aerial of a rest stop off I-74, semi after semi arranged like sleeping whales. In the lower left, a van ghosted past the pumps and pulled to the farthest corner. A passenger stepped out, short, moving fast, carrying nothing. The shot zoomed in as if the sky itself had a camera. The passenger disappeared behind the rest area maintenance building. 10 seconds later, the van pulled away without them. The screen blacked. The regular ad resumed without apology. People threw remote controls. People texted the station. The station posted a statement blaming a vendor playout error, which is not a thing the public understands but sounds official enough to calm anyone who wants to be calmed. On a private engineering Slack, a junior tech typed, "Who put a router on VLAN 37? And no one responded. At 1:40 a.m., a caller to the sheriff's tip line whispered so softly the operator had to replay it 4 times. The voice said, "Stop looking for vans. Start looking for trailers." Then a click. Patel ran plate readers on eastbound rigs that night. One plate pinged in a pattern that felt like a drumbeat. Michigan City, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Louisville, circling the state like a shark, always within an hour of each disappearance. The company tied to the plate specialized in seasonal hires and third-party logistics. The registered owner was a shell. The real owner, after 3 more shells, was a charitable foundation that ran youth sports camps in the summer. The foundation treasurer's name sounded familiar to Ava because she had seen it in another place. A plaque on the wall at the sheriff's office honoring top donors to the Shop with a Cop Christmas drive. The third ticker hit a different market entirely, Williford, 3 of 7. By then, people had begun to split into teams, the ones who said hoax and the ones who said plan. The hoax team said someone was piggybacking on grief for clicks. The plan team said no one hacks multiple stations across 2 states just to troll. The plan team was louder at 3 in the morning when refrigerators hummed and every headlight felt like the wrong kind of attention. Ava filmed a quiet piece in the park, breath fogging, street lamp halo blown out just enough to feel cinematic. She said patterns don't become conspiracies until they touch money and power. She asked viewers who worked in broadcasting to contact her securely. She put a short link on the screen. In the first hour she received 7 messages, 4 about routers and redundant feeds and 1 about a former master control operator who left abruptly last summer for a job at a foundation that pays better. The operator's name was Eli Carver. His sister had disappeared in Iowa in 2006 and was never found. At dawn, the river gave up a second burner phone wrapped the same way as the first. This one had 2 files on it. The first showed Mateo wheeling a cart through the store, humming, unaware. The second was shot from the far corner of the loading dock. The same off-screen voice said, 2. The camera didn't chase. It didn't need to. The screen went black and stayed that way long enough that watchers had to breathe on purpose. Pressure changes the shape of things. It makes good men clench their jaws. It makes small towns suspect their neighbors. It makes journalists either careful or brave. Ava decided brave was more honest. She knocked on the door of the treasurer of the Youth Foundation, a man named Carl Hutton who sold farm equipment for 20 years and donated a scoreboard to the high school. He answered in socks and a sweatshirt with the school mascot on it and tried very hard to be offended. He said the foundation rented trucks twice a year to move athletic gear between storage sites. He said any connection to logistics shells was a coincidence of modern accounting. He said he knew Sheriff Grady from church. He said Ava should be careful about slander. Then he glanced, just once, at the set of keys hanging on a hook by the door. One key fob had a broken plastic shell and a piece of duct tape wrapped tight around the metal like a bandage. Ava's camera wasn't rolling. She told herself that was fine. She told herself she would remember. Sheriff Grady increased patrols, made noise about curfews, and scheduled town halls where people said the same 5 things into microphones. He also quietly reassigned Deputy Corbin, the one with the burner phone and the cautious eyes, to evidence inventory in the basement. Grady told himself he needed Corbin's meticulousness elsewhere. He told himself it had nothing to do with how Corbin had asked, in front of 2 troopers and a state analyst, why the sheriff had denied a joint task force request from the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Unit. The denial email carried a boilerplate line about local control and jurisdiction. It also carried a blind copy to an address registered to the Youth Foundation. 3 days after Mateo vanished, a 4th town lit up in red, Eagle Bay. 4 of 7. A college freshman walking from the library to his dorm never made it upstairs. A security guard noticed a maintenance door propped open with a folded cardboard box that smelled faintly of dish soap. The guard closed the door. The footage showed nothing. A 5th town followed, Miller Falls. 5 of 7. A mother leaving a late shift at a nursing home texted her sister she was craving pancakes and then stopped responding. Her car was found still warm behind a shuttered bowling alley, keys on the seat, driver door cracked like someone meant to come right back and didn't. Patel's map gained more dots and more circles. Large distribution centers ringed the entire path like waypoints. A pattern emerged of camera outages in staggered bursts, east, then south, then west, like someone testing a system or covering their own trail by overcovering. Ava's viewers, truckers, station engineers, warehouse night supervisors, fed her details. A forklift operator in Williford said a trailer had arrived sealed but felt light, in a way you learn to notice after years. The seal number didn't match the manifest. His boss told him to let it go. He didn't. He wrote the number down and sent it to Ava. She sent it to Patel. It matched a lot belonging to Hutton Logistics Charitable. Ava parked by the river where cell service dipped in and out and watched the bridge lights smear in the current. She spoke into her camera about American places that look safe because nothing bad has happened there lately. She talked about how people who do harm learn to look like help. She mentioned Sheriff Grady's church and Hutton's scoreboard and the way the foundation's tax filings were filed late 3 years running and corrected without explanation. As she finished, her phone buzzed with an anonymous video. It began with a black screen and the soft talk of a turn signal. Then a woman's voice rushed out like someone starting a sentence too far into a sprint. She said, "He's not the one you think. It's the other one. The one you don't look at because he doesn't talk much. The one with the new boots." The clip ended with the sound of a coin dropping on plastic, like a vending machine rejecting money. Ava replayed evidence in her head. New deputy, doesn't wave, sits in his cruiser nights with the engine off. Name, Evan Krell, transferred from Ohio after a stint in highway interdiction. Clean file. Too clean. She asked to see his shift logs. Grady said no. She filed a public records request. Grady said it would take weeks. She knocked on Krell's apartment door. No answer. She leaned and listened and heard a white noise machine. She knocked again. A neighbor cracked his door and said Krell never brought groceries in. He always left with a gym bag and came back with nothing. At 2:09 a.m., the 6th ticker arrived with no station logo at all, just white letters burned into black like an accusation. North Ash, 6 of 7. The missing person was a nurse who had traded shifts to attend her kid's school play. She made it to the parking lot and then a teacher found her phone face down under the bleachers the next morning. At 4:32 a.m., a dash cam caught a patrol car parked behind the rest area maintenance building that had appeared in the hacked broadcast. The cruiser lights were off. A man stood in the shadows and smoked, the ember a small floating star. He wore new boots. When he stepped toward the edge of light, the camera caught the profile for less than a second, enough to see the jawline, the haircut, the shape of a badge. Enough for Ava to slow the clip and feel her stomach drop. It was Krell. She sent the frame to Patel and to Corbin. Patel called within 5 minutes with a voice that sounded like all the air had been pulled out of the room. He said, "It's worse." He overlaid the patrol GPS logs that dispatch had access to with the clip timestamp. Krell's cruiser, according to the record, was logged 2 miles away at that moment. Someone had changed the logs. Someone with admin access. Someone like a sheriff. Breaking a case is not the same as solving it. It's the moment you stop pretending the neat version will arrive with sirens and applause. Ava drove straight to the only person in the building who had not yet learned to love shortcuts, Deputy Corbin. He had a checklist for everything and pen marks on his hand. He listened to the GPS discrepancy and looked like a man trying to fit two true facts into one reality. He said he couldn't help from inside. He said there were cameras in the evidence room that were there to watch the room but lately seemed pointed at the door. He said if things were dirty, they were dirty above his pay grade. Ava said corruption always hides incompetence. Corbin said give me one thing I cannot unsee. Ava handed him the still of Krell behind the rest area building and the email headers from the FBI task force denial. Corbin stared long enough for seconds to become a decision. He said, okay. Then he did something small and disloyal. He scanned the evidence room checkout logs for every item touched by either Grady or Krell in the last 2 weeks. He found a pattern no one else was looking for because no one else thought flashlights were interesting. Krell had checked out the same model of high-lumen flashlight 6 times. Grady had signed return forms each time with his neat block letters. The flashlights were never logged back in. Corbin called the supplier. The supplier said that model had a hidden tailcap strobe used in night construction to signal trucks without waking whole neighborhoods. Ava and Corbin sat in a diner booth and built the ugly theory. You wouldn't move people in vans. You would move them in trailers where inspectors are bored and paperwork looks dull on purpose. You would need to blind cameras along a route, which requires inside access. You would need a staging area where law enforcement would not be bothered, like behind an abandoned grain silo with a view of the river and a sheriff's cruiser parked on the access road to make nervous people keep driving. You would need partners at loading docks, a treasurer to paper the shells, a deputy who doesn't wave, and a sheriff with the reputation to shush anyone who asked why an FBI request was denied. You would also need a distraction, ticks on TV, 1 of 7, the hacker story. And maybe that distraction was not the traffickers doing it all. Maybe it was Eli Carver, the ex-master control operator whose sister disappeared years ago, hijacking lower thirds and hijacking people's attention to force patterns into view. Maybe his 1 of 7 was not a threat. Maybe it was a countdown. Ava messaged Eli at the burner address she'd been given. He answered in 4 minutes. He said he knew he would either go to prison or be sued into dust but did not care. He said the 7th would be the hardest because people look hardest at 7s. He said the 7th was scheduled for Friday 9:00 p.m., the high school football game, when traffic would be predictable and law enforcement clustered at one place. He said the maintenance building at the rest area had a subpanel that controlled 3 parking lot poles and the camera NVR inside. He said the padlock had been replaced with a county facilities lock 2 weeks ago. He said he could spoof a storm to mask the camera drop. He said, "You wanted a plan? Here's the plan." Plans look clean on napkins. On highways they leak. Ava, Corbin, and Patel pulled in favors. A state trooper they trusted parked a mile short with his lights off. A trucker with a guilt debt blocked a lane briefly to slow the flow exactly when it needed slowing. Eli did what Eli did from a room that hummed. At 8:52, the rest area camera feed hiccuped and froze on a loop of empty concrete. At 8:57, a tractor-trailer with a mismatched cab and trailer rolled in like it had done 100 times. At 8:58, a sheriff's cruiser turned onto the maintenance lane and stopped behind the building. 2 figures stepped into the slice of darkness between poles. One was Krell, the gait recognizable now that you knew it. The other was taller, heavier, older. He wore a brimmed hat. He moved with the ease of a man who had practiced. Ava whispered into her phone and forgot to breathe. Corbin whispered, "Wait for the open. Wait for the open." The trailer door cracked. A rectangle of colder air exhaled. A hand reached out from inside and then disappeared as if pulled back. Krell lifted his flashlight and pulsed the tail cap strobe twice, signal ready. The taller man did not look around because men who own places don't look around, they look through. He stepped close to the door, bent, and said something that the directional mic did not catch. Then from the far edge of the lot, a semi honked a single short honk. It was a warning the plan did not account for. A minivan cut the corner wrong and almost clipped a cone. A rest stop custodian pushed a trash cart out a side door and froze at the sight of the cruiser. Chaos is a moral force. It creates choices. Krell turned to shoo the custodian. The taller man lifted his head. His face tipped into half-light. Corbin inhaled a curse he didn't finish. It was Sheriff Luke Grady. Ava moved before Corbin did. She sprinted low along the shadow seam of the tree line, camera shoved into her jacket, voice working on muscle memory. She reached the back corner of the maintenance building the moment a figure jumped from the trailer and ran, not away but toward the trees. Small, fast, head down. Ava stuck out an arm on instinct and bumped them off balance. They tumbled together in wet leaves. The figure rolled and came up with a box cutter and panic. Ava put her hands up and said a name she did not know she knew until it fell out of her mouth, Emily. The box cutter clattered away. The girl's eyes were wide and wired and wild, but her face was her yearbook photo, only with 3 weeks of hard miles. She said one word before the night exploded, 7. Lights hit from both sides. Sirens arrived from nowhere and everywhere. Corbin shouted, "Hands! Hands!" Troopers rushed the trailer door. Krell reached for his sidearm. Grady reached for his. Patel screamed into a radio that didn't belong to him that officers were compromised. Eli's feet wobbled as if even the air inside the cable wanted to flee. The trailer door lifted fully, and inside were 6 people sitting cross-legged like they had been told to be small. 3 blinked hard at the sudden light. 1 lifted her chin. She was the nurse whose phone had been found under bleachers. She said, "I counted the turns." Then Krell fired. Someone else fired. The custodian screamed. Tires bit gravel. Ava grabbed Emily and pulled her behind the concrete lip of the subpanel. A bullet hit the metal with a sound like church bells in hell. And through the tinny hiss of a half-hacked radio channel, a voice Ava recognized from 100 press conferences said, very calmly, "Units, hold perimeter. I'll handle the scene ****. The hour after gunfire is a strange ocean. People wade in without knowing what hides under the surface. Troopers swarmed. Some obeyed instinct. Some obeyed rank. Ava kept Emily close and felt how light she was, as if worry had burned her from the inside out. Emily said, "It's not all him," and Ava said, "Who?" And Emily nodded toward the cruiser and said, "He takes them, but someone else decides who." Grady barked orders with that steady cadence small towns love. Krell bled from a shoulder crease but stood like it was a weather inconvenience. Corbin stood with his hands where everyone could see them and chose each next thing like a man stepping carefully on rotting boards. Eli pushed a final interruption through the station's control room and burned his credentials on the way out. The broadcast split screens. On the left, the sheriff at a podium 6 months ago next to a smiling treasurer receiving a plaque. On the right, a spreadsheet that looked unremarkable unless your eye caught the repetition. Invoice numbers increment to mass donations that weren't donations at all. Payment descriptions listed fall youth field rentals, on the exact dates each of the 6 towns' camera outages occurred. At the bottom, a signature line bore the neat block letters of Luke Grady and the countersign of Carl Hutton. The station cut to black after 5 seconds. It was enough. Hutton did not run. Men who build their lives on handshakes believe handshakes will save them. He raised both palms in the parking lot and said he could explain. He said logistics is complicated. He said sometimes pallets ride with pallets, sometimes you rent your DOT number to offset lien quarters. He said words as if words were sandbags, stacking them against a flood. Corbin read him his rights, voice steady not because he wasn't afraid but because he was. Krell stared at the line of troopers and did a calculation Ava could almost see. Too many guns now, not enough secrets left. He relaxed his jaw and chose silence. Grady tried a different line. He said the trailer was part of a sting he couldn't announce. He said Krell fired because an unknown subject lunged. He said he denied the FBI request because leaks kill stings. He said the ticks on TV were the act of a sick hacker. He almost sold it. He had the voice for it, the posture, but then the nursing home mother in the trailer stood and said, "He's lying." She said when someone takes you by the elbow like you're a kid crossing a street and says you'll see home soon if you behave, you learn the texture of his hand. She said the texture of the sheriff's hand was the texture of the man who closed the trailer 2 nights ago. Ava filmed it all as if her camera were the only proof that would outlive the shouting. She filmed Corbin cuffing Hutton. She filmed Krell on the bumper of the cruiser, pale and alert and already crafting a smaller guilt to hide a larger one. She filmed the moment two troopers looked at each other and then at Grady and then at their captain and decided to follow the captain instead. And she filmed Emily tug her sleeve and whisper, "It's not done. I told you 7. Emily's pupils were huge. She had that particular clarity that sometimes follows fear like lightning follows thunder. She said we were 7 because 7s make people pay attention, but there were more. The ones earlier, the ones quiet, the ones whose towns don't have stations worth hacking. She said she staged the culvert camera because she knew attention was the only currency that could compete. She said she got herself picked by staying late, by biking alone, by making eye contact with a lens she had planted above her own route days before. She said, "I made myself a bad choice." Ava felt something crack in her chest that was not anger and not pity but a heavier alloy of both. The county, the state, and the federal alphabet soup descended before dawn. The story bloomed and warped in the way national stories do. Headlines made heroes and villains too fast. Lawyers shaped sentences. A press conference turned into a battlefield of microphones. Ava uploaded, vanished in plain sight, the 7th night. It broke her channel. It saved 6 lives. It ruined 3 careers. It opened a dozen investigations into quiet corners where money moves like water downhill. 2 weeks later, in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and winter coats, Sheriff Luke Grady pled not guilty. His lawyer said his client was a dupe, a fool, a man used by smarter men. He named Carl Hutton as the architect and Krell as the enforcer. He called Ava a provocateur who compromised a delicate operation. The judge told him to sit down. Outside, television trucks lined the curb and a woman from the nursing home hugged her kids so hard he laughed just to make her loosen her grip. Ava visited the river alone one evening when the sky was the color of nickel. Emily stood beside her, hands inside sleeves, hair under a knit cap someone's aunt had made. They looked at the water as if it could answer anything. Emily said, "There's a basement in Eagle Bay under a thrift store." "Not theirs. Someone else's. I think there are networks that don't know each other until they need to." Ava said, "We'll keep looking." Emily said, "It doesn't end because a sheriff did." They stood in the wind until their eyes watered, and neither admitted they were crying. The 7th ticker never appeared on television again. But sometimes, in the lower right corner of Ava's uploads, a frame flashed and vanished. No words, just a thin white line shaped like a highway loop, the road that ringed 3 states and kept the world moving because Americans believe motion is safety. The line brightened at 7 points like a constellation you can only see if you already know where it is. And in the comments, at 2 in the morning when the refrigerator hummed and wind walked across yards full of flags, truckers posted dashcam stills and engineers posted router configs and warehouse workers posted seal numbers. And sometimes, someone posted 3 words and nothing else. "We're still counting."